it kicked in. Uh,
I have it up on my end. See if you could join in.
yeah, I'm just having a formatting problem. I ran into something on my calendar about silver sneakers.
Oh, God.
Hold on.
And once you come in, I can make you a co-host. Oh,
Okay.
there you are. Okay, I'm going to admit you. Okay.
Oh, wait, no, well, okay, well, I wasn't going to stay on. I guess I can stay up. Well, we have to keep the session open then.
No, I'll just make you a co-host.
Okay, but then and you'll just keep the session open until 7?
I don't care. Okay, yeah.
Well, if you don't, we have to start over. Yeah, we have to.
No problem. I'll just keep it open. I'll stop the recording.
To this edition of the active learning teams presentations for East Falls Village. And for those of you who aren't members, welcome particularly. Tonight, I think we have a wonderfully interesting program. We have Evan Laine, who has a master's and a JD. He's an associate professor of history at Jefferson. And he's the faculty director of the Arlen Specter Center that most of us know on Schoolhouse Lane. And he has examined Arlen Specter's decades-long career through storytelling and photos in his book, Arlen Specter, Scandals, Conspiracies, and Crisis in Focus. And we are going to hear about the book, what's in the book, about the book, and probably some other very interesting tidbits. So, Evan?
And folks, if you want to go to view on your upper right-hand corner and select speaker view, then you'll see Evan.
Well, thank you very much for that nice introduction, and I do appreciate it. I want to tell you first how I got about to write the book, the approach I took in it, and then we'll discuss one particular very important incident which I think had not only effect on our country, but on the world, that Arlen Specter was an extremely important part of. When I was selected to be the faculty head of the Arlen Specter Center, I'm a New Yorker, you probably can figure that out within minutes. And I knew who he was. You know, of course, I knew the Warren Commission, everyone knows that. But I didn't know the extent of his career. And I learned a lot of it by going into the office. I know I've met some of you at the center. And when you go into the center, we recreated his office, and there's pictures on the wall, all over the walls of him and a world leader. And I'd always give the tours. And so the thing was, people would say, who's that? That's the first thing that Specter's with. But the more important question was, what's going on? And I delved deeply into what these pictures meant. And I discovered that Specter, miraculously, much for his personality, was in the center of some of the most important things that have happened to our nation. What he did in them determined often what happens in the United States, if not the world. So I wanted to write a book on that. And when you write a book to show someone's importance, you have to give background. And you've got to go deep into the subject, because otherwise you don't understand why that person is important, why the role they played was so critical. So that's what the book is about. It explores various different areas of his career. I'll tell you some of them I went over. One concerns, of course, the Supreme Court and the non-selection of Robert Bork and the selection of Clarence Thomas. Both of those, Senator Specter had a critical role in. I talk about the Clinton impeachment, which again, Specter had a very important role in, and tell the full story of that. We get deep into Iran-Contra, which is a very misunderstood conspiracy, which is extremely complicated. But again, no surprise, Specter played an incredibly important part in that and how things unfolded. I also go into stem cell research, which he was a very strong proponent of, and get into the medical behind what is stem cell and what was his role. But for this particular talk, we're going to talk about the financial crisis when the housing bubble broke, because I think that it's particularly newsworthy right now, because it involves the filibuster, it involves a thing called cloture, which some of you may know and not know. It involves Specter being the man in this, which is really not known by many people, that may have saved our economy, if not world economy, by the way he went. And more importantly, it highlights somebody who made a very important decision that went against, no question, his personal, professional interests in life. But he went against his party, he went against what was best for him personally, and did what he thought was best for the citizens of the Commonwealth and the citizens of the United States, if not the world. And I think that is especially important right now, where a politician didn't care about his own power, but instead cared about doing what was right for the country at the time. So I'd like to examine that particular crisis. A lot of you, I'm sure, know a lot about it, but maybe not as much as is in the books. I'd like to cover it. Also, this is not a straight lecture. You're probably going to have questions. Please ask them. I love answering questions because it clarifies for everyone and it delves deeper into it. And hopefully at the end, once we handle this topic, I will then open it for general questions on things I can answer. There are things, obviously, Senator's career was 30 years long. I don't know everything, but I know on the things that I wrote about. So I'd like to start with it. As you folks know, the housing bubble was a disaster. What had happened is this, and I was part of this, and some of you might have been. There was a fever going through the country. It was called high price of real estate. And the thing was, real estate never goes down. So interest rates were down and people were buying and selling homes. And I think the best example is where I live. I live in Cherry Hill, where the racetrack used to be. And what they decided to do is they knocked down the racetrack and they were going to put up townhomes. They held this huge party, a raffle. There were so many requests for these homes that there wasn't enough homes, so they had to put up for raffle. And people were selling, if they won the raffle, they were selling their rights to buy the townhome at a profit before you even bought the house. It was just the right to buy a house. That's how much the fever was of everyone wanting to make money. And everyone was involved. It was the Democrats, the Republicans, it was everyone. Everyone's to blame on this because the thought was, no one loses money ever. Real estate always goes up. It's not going to be a problem. So this is this fever that I think we all saw or experienced personally ourselves. The way it was when I bought a house some time ago, and I'm sure all of you as well, you had to afford it. You had to put at least 20% down on that property because then you had skin in the game. If you bought a $100,000 house, you had to put 20 grand. So that's real money. And when I went to get my first mortgage, I had to give all kinds of things from my employer, my paychecks. There's all kinds of information on how to give to guarantee the best that I was going to pay that mortgage. So all these people, we'll call them apples in a barrel. And all these people who had money and put 20% down, who had good jobs, who were making money, were buying homes. And the mortgage business was doing great. People were buying homes. Everyone's happy. Home Depot's happy because people are buying stuff. So everyone's happy. It's like a big money party that everyone's involved in. But here is the problem. Not everyone has 20% down. Most people don't. Most people don't have jobs that could afford luxurious homes. So the market started to dwindle on all these good apples in the barrel. So what the mortgage people did is they said, we'll take 10% down. We'll loosen those, bring more people in. So now you're getting more people in, more people are buying homes, Home Depot's happy, Lowe's is happy, everyone is happy, okay? But what happens is the 10% start running out. So now you go down to 5%. Now, on a $100,000 house, $5,000 is not that much skin in the game. But you know what? That still wasn't enough. And now what was happening is that they were giving 0 down mortgages. You don't have to put anything down, which means, think about that. If you've got no money in the home and you can't afford the mortgage, you walk. Well, who cares? You walk out. But they didn't care. They still wanted more people because people couldn't afford the 8 or 9 or 5%, whatever it was. So what they did is they created adjustable rate mortgages, which brought people in at 2, 3%, or even lower. But in 5 years or 3 years, it jacks up to 9. But who reads the small print? So you have all these people coming into this hot market, and many of them can't afford those homes they're buying. But what's the problem? If you can't afford, you just sell it, right? And real estate always goes up, no problem. So now Wall Street said, we can make some money on this. We can sell mortgages, group them together in a thing called a derivative. And we sell groups of mortgages. See, in the old days, when I took my first loan out, Chemical Bank in New York, I paid Chemical Bank for year after year after year. Chemical Bank cared about me because I paid them. But now they said, let's put these things together and sell them as a commodity. And if we have 20 mortgages as a commodity, if one goes bad in the group, oh, you have 19 good ones. So it's wonderful, it's safe. But all these good apples were started mixing with bad apples. And suddenly these barrels that were being sold were filled with tons of bad apples. And the bottom fell out. Suddenly, millions, trillions of dollars fell out. And this is how it happened. AIG insured all these things. Now, if you bought these derivatives, they were insured. What a great deal. I can't lose. But AIG didn't have enough money to pay for all these failed mortgages. So they went under. And the banks that depended on these derivatives, when they went bust, they went under. And our economy collapsed. It totally collapsed. And when US collapses, the world collapses. And it was a disaster. And all of this happened as George Bush Jr. was leaving office. All of this happened during the election with Obama and McCain. And Obama obviously was elected president. And this is what he walked into, an outright disaster. Trillions were lost. Now, all these people who couldn't pay their homes say, well, I'll just put it out on the market. But if all of you put your home on the market in East Falls, what happens to the price of homes? It goes down, too much supply. So you may have had a $200,000 house and now it's worth $140,000, and you may have a $200,000 mortgage on it. So you're in arrears at $60,000, you can't sell the house. So what you do is you walk out, which further ruins the property values of everyone around you. So it's a cancer that is spreading everywhere. People are losing jobs. The stock market lost half of its value. It was a disaster. This is what Obama walked into. Our good friend, Senator McConnell and Senator Voinovich made a statement, which they have recently said again, that no matter what the Democratic president wants or does, we're against. We're against it. No matter what it is, we're against it. Our goal is to make them a one-term presidency, and they actually said this. So Obama came to the Senate and the Congress and said the only way we can save America is to put a ton of money through a stimulus package, heat up the economy again, get people working so they spend, so that they go out, have them working, prime the pump, essentially Adam Smith economics, prime the pump, get it going. The Republican response was no. And there was no other plan. The answer was no. Well, there was a Democratic Congress. They passed the stimulus, easy. There was a Democratic Senate, but here's the problem. 58 Democrats, not 60. Now, why does that make a difference? Filibuster. Filibuster is the following. You could prevent a bill from being voted on. It used to be that you talk forever, and now they don't have to do it. You just declare a filibuster. You declare the filibuster, and that bill never gets voted on, no matter what the need is. The only way to beat that is with 60 votes. If you get 60 votes to beat it, it's called a cloture. And the Democrats had 58. The Republican Party was told very clearly, there is no way you vote for cloture. Absolutely none. And that's where Arlen Specter comes in. Specter saw Obama at a speech, and Obama and him actually connected on several ways. Nancy, you have a question? No, okay, it's just okay. Be careful with that. Okay, so anyway, Obama and him actually connected on a personal level because they were outsiders. Obama, obviously being an African American, born in Hawaii, coming to America, found himself very much an outsider his whole life. Specter, being born in the Midwest, being Jewish, was probably one of the two Jews in town and always felt very an outsider. So they would talk about that, on how they were outsiders. So they connected on a personal level, which is very important in politics, or used to be very important in politics. So Obama gives a speech and he says, disaster is coming our way. A worldwide depression is going to happen. We have to do something. And Specter understood that the people of Pennsylvania would face incredible pain if such a thing happened. Obama was smart because he knew that his vice president was a close personal friend of Arlen Specter. And I'll give you a little story. This is how they met. Joe Biden was a senator for a while, and he would take the train, we all know, he would take the train up to Delaware. And so would Specter, take it up to PA, but the same train. And one day, Biden's sitting on the train, and the train is being held up. And he goes to the conductor, he says, what's going on? Why is the train? He says, well, a senator just called and said to hold up the train. They go, well, who is that senator? He goes, Arlen Specter. He goes, he just was elected. How could he hold up the train? And that's how they met. He says, who is this guy who has the unbelievable gall to hold up an Amtrak train? And that's how they met. And they would sit next to each other. The picture is in the book. It's a great picture of them actually debating and talking and sharing stories. And what Specter would say, the only chance he ever had to talk is after Biden got off in Delaware. That would be a nonstop diatribe. And we all know the president, he can talk. So they developed a really nice relationship. And President Obama knew that if the words he put, I used in the book is, it'd be like basketball. Biden's going to play Specter one-on-one. Everywhere he goes, he's going to be talking to Specter about why this is necessary. And Biden really had a big voice in this. Super Bowl night, great picture in the book in the Arlen Specter Center. It's a picture of Obama, Michelle Obama, and Specter and his wife, Joan. He was invited to a Super Bowl party at the White House. And at that Super Bowl party, that's where Specter decided he has to vote for cloture. He has to. He talked about it with his family, and they knew he was done in the Republican Party if he did that. I mean, he was told right off, you'd be done. It's over for you. Your career is over if you do this. But he had to do it because that was the right thing to do. And I really want you to take a moment to think about that, because yesterday I watched testimony about what happened on January 6th, which is extremely emotional for me to watch. I watched 4 of our finest who saved lives that day talk about how they nearly died defending the Capitol and defending our democracy. And yet there are people out there still diminishing it and saying it was a vacation. Those were just typical vacationers coming to visit the House. So partisan politics is so strong, as you can see, as demonstrated already. But Specter decided he had to do the right thing. He had a lot of influence over the two main senators. He called them, who were also Republicans, and they said, if you, Arlen, if you vote for cloture, we're going along with you. So they got their 61 votes, and cloture was defeated. And as a result of that, and only that, and they admit the other main senators, had it not been for Arlen Specter, they would have never, ever put their careers on the line like they did that day. And he took the brunt of it. He took almost all the brunt of it. Stimulus was passed when Obama left office. The stock market had recovered. Unemployment was at its lowest levels. And there's many who will argue that the stimulus was primary, if not extremely important, in making that happen. And had not Specter done that, had not he put his career on the line, and again, think about today's politics, where party means everything and what's right doesn't, where people are afraid to speak out, so afraid to speak out because they don't want to lose their jobs, even though what is right is what is right. He decided to end his career, essentially. He knew he was dead in the Republican Party. So he tried to run as a Democrat, and he didn't pass the primaries, as we know, and that ended his career. So I'd like to open up, before we get into more things, I'd like to open up for questions on that or comments before we go on to some other things on what happened on that. John?
Professor, thanks for the book. It was very interesting. One of the things that I missed in it was a discussion of the real cost of his switch to the Democratic Party after the stimulus vote. And I wonder why you didn't get into it. He lost his committee seniority, which he thought he had an agreement with Harry Reid on this. Either Harry Reid overpromised, which I think he did, or Senator Specter, I would hardly call him naive, but he overexpected what he could do and the kind of power he could retain. He lost congressional stature in a way, and it was a costly move. And of course, as we know, he lost to Joe Sestak in the primary. It didn't help him in the end. Not that had he retained his committee positions, it would have made a great difference. But the fact that he lost them, the fact that he lost his position on the Judiciary Committee, where, as you point out, he had presided over Bork, the Bork nomination. He had played an important role in the Thomas nomination. And after his switch, he would go on to sit on the Sotomayor and the Kagan nominations. But he no longer had the power of the chairmanship, and it was a real loss, and I think a surprising loss to him that cost him standing.
It cost him everything, John. He was promised by Obama that Obama would come campaign for him.
Yes, he was.
And Obama didn't. And the reason why Obama didn't, which is actually in Obama's book, I don't know if you've got a chance to read it, but
no.
He had endorsed several people that had failed because he had the midterms that didn't go well, and he had endorsed several people who didn't win. And at that point, it was looked at that Specter was not going to win, whether Obama came or not, and to endorse him would be another political loss.
Yep.
So Specter lost everything, everything he had. I mean, you're talking about a 30-year career of someone who didn't just sit there and enjoy being a senator, but actually was involved in so many important things, making the world happen. And this was taken away from him. So I think what you're saying is paints just what a very important, difficult decision that he made, but still made it.
But he thought he would make it and retain committee standing, and he didn't.
Yeah, he did not.
He thought he had an understanding with Harry Reid, and Harry Reid, in his defense, might have felt that he could bring the Democratic Party along to accept that, but they weren't about to accept stepping aside and giving up their leadership so Arlen Specter, a turncoat Republican, could walk into their positions of leadership, or he could retain his positions of leadership in his committee assignments. It was a brutal, brutal shock. And I don't think he ever totally recovered from that. And as you point out, then Obama didn't fight down to the wire for him. It was politics, and Arlen was a good politician. His son Shannon, in many ways, was a brilliant politician, but he lost on that. And I don't think it would have made a difference if he had stayed a Republican. They were about to censure him if they didn't, the state Republican Party. So he wasn't going to win. And he wanted to go out with his shoes on. And it was a sad ending in a way to a distinguished career and a very long career in Congress, the longest serving senator in Pennsylvania history.
John, there are senators who did 1/10 of what he did, 1/10 of what he accomplished, who have libraries that are funded in the millions, who get support, frankly, beyond what they deserve. Even senators who have, let's say, difficult backgrounds, I'm not going to name who they are, but who were racist, who have centers and libraries far, far more funded. And when he did what he did, not only did he destroy, John, his current career, but he destroyed to many a legacy that and a hostility that many still have towards him. And that's a lot to give up because because you believe you were doing the right thing.
What do you think, Professor, if you had to assess his greatest legacy, his greatest accomplishment as a U.S. senator who served for a very long time, what do you think that would be? What would you? Is it in the area of foreign policy? I can tell you what I think. I'd be interested to hear what you think.
Okay. Well, I'll give you what he thought, and then I'll give you what I thought. He thought it was the stimulus fund. He thought that was the most important thing he did in his career. I think it was keeping Robert Bork off the Supreme Court.
Okay.
What do you think?
I'm thinking in broader terms. The stimulus vote, yes, of his 10,000 votes, he viewed that and said it was his most important. And on the Supreme Court, a lot of people would agree that keeping Bork off was his greatest achievement. I'm thinking broader. Specter had an understanding of foreign affairs that said you talk to your enemy. It's better to talk than make war. So you talk to Arafat, you talk to Hafez al-Assad in Syria, you talk to
Castro.
You talk to your enemies in the Middle East. It's better than confronting them. He talked to Castro. He didn't like Arafat and felt he was a terrorist, but he swallowed his opposition and he talked to Arafat and came close or closer than many, to moving the Mideast crisis off the dime. I admired him for that. He was a centrist, but he believed in negotiating with some of the worst dictators, and including Saddam Hussein. He was willing to go all out and strive for new ways to bring peace to the world. I felt that was, to me anyway, was his most important lasting legacy. He had others. And as you point out, the stimulus vote and the Bork nomination were key things that he was involved in. He would not be happy with Congress today and the state of brutal partisanship that has taken over the government. Specter didn't sit for what's going on right now, although it's been a little better under Biden. I don't have a whole lot of confidence that we move beyond the brutal reign of partisanship that we have. That's me.
Thank you, John.
Dina had her hand up. Unmute yourself, Dina.
Yeah, I'm unmuted. Hi. I didn't hear the first 10 minutes because I didn't know the password, but I don't know if you covered this. One of the things that I knew about Specter was that he was a pro-choice Republican, which was, somewhat different than some of the other Republicans then. So I was upset on his stand that he took with Anita Hill. So could you explain that a bit, why he took that stand? He was very, I thought, brutal with her.
Dina, I covered it in the book a lot.
Okay.
On it. I think, oh no, no problem. And it's a very complicated issue that's multiple. I'll say a couple of things. The first thing is, and this is no excuse at all, but he was a product of a different time, and that's no excuse at all. But moving on to more sophisticated answers. Clarence Thomas lied to him. And I think there's a very important story that hasn't gotten out on a couple of things. I spoke to two of his most trusted aides on this, who gave me really an inside story. He knew that there was no way there would be any other African-American that was going to replace Thurgood Marshall other than Clarence Thomas. It's either going to be Clarence Thomas or it wouldn't be an African-American. And many times in court history, people come on with conservative points of view and they be liberalized. Earl Warren is a great, Brennan is another great example of this. And even our Chief Justice is starting for that to happen. He thought that having an African-American on the Supreme Court was worthwhile. I'll counter that with what Thurgood Marshall said when he was asked about this. And he said, a snake is a snake, no matter what color its head is. So, you can look at it both ways. But he was bamboozled in one thing as well. Clarence Thomas was brought in and interviewed by Specter. Now, he was only a judge for a year and a half and had a very unaccomplished career up until then. He had very few decisions that were of any importance. So there was very little to review on what he had said or done officially. But there was a case that dealt with affirmative action. And it was a Supreme Court case. So Specter said, what do you think of this case? It dealt with women buying TV stations and radio stations, getting favored position because there were so few women who were owners. And the Supreme Court said that's okay because there's so many men and not enough women involved. He says, what do you think of that case? And he said, I have no problem with it. The Supreme Court says what it has to say, and that's it. So he left it at that. And Specter was very strong for affirmative action. What the truth of it was, is after that interview, the day of the confirmations, the day of the actual what was going on, an article came out in the Legal Times, Washington, D.C., that says there was a case called Lembrecht. Lembrecht was a case that was heard in the circuit court, which he was a member of, in a 5-judge panel. It was a 3-2 decision where he wrote the opinion. He lambasted that case and was extremely against affirmative action. So you say, well, how did they not know about it? Now, Dina, here's the cute part, okay? When you write an opinion as a judge, that's your explanation. It goes on for pages and pages. I'm sure many of you know that. And it explains why you're deciding the way you're deciding. But it's not law until you sign a thing called an order. And it's a simple 1-page thing. It says, it is this hereby this day, blank, blank, whatever, hereby ordered and decreed that this case is either affirmed or denied, whatever it is. And that officially makes it a case. It's nothing until then. Well, Clarence Thomas knew, of course, he was being considered for the position, knew that this would be very controversial. So he decided not to sign the order. And when he told Specter, I haven't written anything and I haven't given any opinion against affirmative action, he was telling the truth because he didn't sign the order. So he lied. And when Specter found out about it, he brought in Thomas into his office the day of the vote, and he confronted him with this. And according to the 2 aides, they told me there was a lot of yelling, there was a lot of something going on, but Specter was convinced that Thomas had not lied to him. But Thomas did, because when he was selected as Supreme Court Justice, he was for 1 hour decommissioned. He went over to his old desk, he signed the order, went back to the Supreme Court, and that case was entered on the record. So when I asked his assistants, his legal assistants, would it have made a difference? They were honest and said, I don't know if he would have changed his mind, but you can bet he would have cross-examined him very strongly. And that would have been interesting because Thomas played, the high-tech lynching, he played the race card. If he came out as being strongly against affirmative action and having lied about it, that would have changed the narrative a lot on what happened. So I like to add that to it as well. The motivations were there because he wanted a black man on the court. He thought that would be there, and he didn't know who Clarence Thomas was. So Thomas hit it pretty well. I hope that answers your question to some degree. And read the book. I'll sign it for you for no charge.
Thank you. I never knew that. That's a really interesting part of that case, because I know people who would not vote for him because of what he did from that,
I know.
Yeah, anyhow, I will read the book.
Thank you. Thank you. Anyone else have any questions or comments? Roger.
I wandered off from the screen, and if you go to the events calendar and click on this event, you will see the Amazon link to the book at the top of the write-up.
See the what?
If you go to this event on the events calendar, or if you look it up in the weekly update, you'll find a link to Amazon to buy the book.
Buy the book. Okay. Thank you.
There you go. I make 50 cents on the sale of every book, so make me a rich man, Dina. It's I do want to add there's okay, Margaret, go ahead.
I want to go back to your comment, which you opened up with on the Anita Hill case, which was he was a product of his time, but that's no excuse. Mm-hmm. And it surely is no excuse. But could you say a little bit more about that as you investigated and how he in fact saw what was going on at that time?
Margaret, there's a bigger story to that because I'll be straight up. I like the current president, but I have problems with him. And a lot of the problems do come from this because what a lot of people don't know, and again, I start with I like the current president, is the real culprit in all this is Joe Biden.
I understand that, and I do know that.
There were two witnesses, two women who had similar situations with Clarence Thomas, two very credible women. They were actually in a hotel room under subpoena waiting to testify. And there came a very big discussion of whether they should testify. Specter very strongly said, well, I want to hear what they have to say. And that comes from his prosecutor days, and he wants to hear evidence. It's, I want to know what they have to say. Biden said, we promised the country we'd have the vote by Monday, or whatever the day was. This will delay it. No. Now, when they're all asked, all the senators are asked later, and this is in the book, about what happened with those two witnesses. And here's the funniest part, Margaret. Everybody has a different story. Oh, there were other two witnesses? I didn't know about that, but they all knew, but they were subpoenaed and the lawyer was calling constantly to the committee of when does my client get to testify? When does she get to testify? They knew about it. And they all now are saying they didn't know, but a lot of them are now with us. So that was delayed. They also played, Margaret, a lot on his ego. Remember, he was dinged pretty hard for going against Bork. It's in the book, there was one, this is from a congressman, okay? It's hunting season in my district. Because of the Bork vote, I recommend you not visit. Okay, this is the kind of stuff he was getting from his own party. This was a way, they said, you can do it, you do the cross-examination. Only you could do it, Arlen. And that was by people in the Republican Party. And they played on his ego that she's a liar, that she's only after for her own benefit, which we all know is not true today. And only you can do it. And this is the way you get back in the party. So this is another thing. So there's many elements to answer what Dina originally asked, what is the reason? There are many. His ego was played upon, his position in the Republican Party, wanting an African-American on the court no matter what, being a man, when I say it that way, men for a very long time didn't even consider sexual harassment to be that much of an issue. It was only after this that it became strong. And then again, it wasn't until Me Too recently that again it comes up. I don't have to tell you how many times that issue has to come up before people understand how damn important it is.
You're absolutely right. For most of the women in this group tonight, you don't have to tell us that we went through it all. So yeah. that's and I think we're probably, some of us are older than you. So we really did go through with Anita Hill what happened. Mm-hmm. But I'm still not sure it's particularly clear to me when you say it was at the time that what was actually kind of going through his head, because we all witnessed or saw rather his interrogation. It was pretty tough. Mm-hmm. It was a tough interrogation. So what was going on at that point? And maybe I should ask you, do you really go into depth in your book about what was going on in his head, or do you just pretty much report the story and of the time and what was happening?
No, I go through what other people believe he was doing. There's other things that were involved. There were senators who he believed in very strongly and trusted, who said that Clarence Thomas would be a good for the nation. There are so many, I take it from every angle. If you go into his, without having him alive, and Margaret, I think, you and I have been around long enough, you could ask someone why they did something, and that's really not going to be an accurate answer as well, because people very rarely do know why they particularly do something at the time. I don't know if it would have been that valuable. So what I did is
that's what historians tell you. I mean, that's why history
right.
historians
go. You go to the witnesses and you ask them, what was he doing? You ask Shane, you ask his legal assistants. You go all the interviews that he had, and you try to present as many different reasons
Mhm.
that somebody might have done something they did. And then you as the reader looking at it, it's not my job to tell you what happened because that's not in my power. My power is to give you the evidence that is available and have you as an intelligent reader look at the evidence and then try to make a decision on what you think happened. So I can't tell you what was going through his head, but I can tell you what possible things, what was out there, what were the influences, what he said, what others said, what the situation was. You can't understand Anita Hill if you don't know Bork. You know, that it's part of the whole thing. The Robert Bork thing spills into the Clarence Thomas thing. They're very closely related. So it's another way. All these outside influences come together, and that's to explain best. That's the best I can tell you. But I tried to give you as many as possible.
Thank you.
Anybody else have any questions? All right, then with that, it's a good time to end it. I just want to say one thing. There's a picture in the Specter Center of Arlen Specter between two cliffs. And one side is the Republican Party and one side is the Democratic Party, and him in the middle and both pulling on his legs. And Tony Auth, who is the author of this, his point, I think, was he's between the two parties, but I always interpret it as that he's in the middle of so many things. It's a very unique career to have, to be involved in so many things. We have so many senators who sit today who haven't even sponsored a bill in their career. There's a senator who's constantly interviewed in Florida who hasn't won bill yet. And when you look at the insanity plea, which he changed, by the way, that's one thing I left out, through criminal justice, through career criminal, through all of these things, he was an operative person. And whether, Margaret, you have some negative feelings towards him, Dina may have some negative feelings, and I may have negative feelings to some things he did or not did. But the thing that you have to agree on is he was an important, significant person who left this world with impact.
Please don't think that I had negative feelings. I was asking you questions.
Okay.
So it's more my style of jumping on stuff than being particularly hostile toward him.
I'm glad that.
You know, he was, I do understand, a product of his time. So, and by the way, his wife was a member of our book clubs with Nancy Ginter and Carolyn Cohen for a while. So we got to know her. That was nice.
Margaret, she's a lovely woman, but I'll tell you one thing, you say a product of the time, Cosby just got released, right?
Yeah.
On a technicality. And there are people, women, who are celebrating his release. So
yes, right. I do understand that.
so
I do.
Things are moving forward, but not as fast as we would hope.
I have a question. I heard that you said Joe Biden was more influential in the cross-examination of Anita Hill. But I hear he just apologized to her recently. And I wonder, do you think Arlen Specter would have done that?
You know, he had the chance, Dina, several times and did not.
And he did not. Okay. But that's interesting to know.
He was directly asked that and did not.
Evan, thank you very, very much.
Thank you, Mary.
It's been fascinating. As Roger mentioned, if people go to the website, to the calendar of events, they will be able to order your book online.
And
Thank you.
Hopefully.
I have a question. Interestingly enough, when John talked about how Specter got to or met with Castro and other people like that, could you talk a little bit about the wall of pictures at the Specter Center and also the interesting picture from Clinton's impeachment?
There's a couple of very interesting things. I'll talk first with Arafat. He did not have good feelings initially to Arafat at all. in light of the Kili Laru, the other terrorist attacks, the Olympic attack, and so forth. But when he came to visit the United States and the president shook his hand, Specter at that point said, well, I have to deal with this man because he's an important man, whatever my personal feelings are. So the relationship was developed. And as John very rightly pointed out, you talk to people even if you don't like them. And it made a very big difference because the Oslo Accords were entered between the Arab people and Israelis. Yasser Arafat endorsed it. And one of the most important parts was that Yasser Arafat could not announce independent state without the agreement of Israel. Very important part of the Oslo Accords. He was making a lot of noise. He was going to do it anyway. And that could have been very dangerous to do. Israel would have seen that as a breach of the Oslo Accords, and who knows what could have happened. He visited the Senate at that time, and he went to visit Specter. Specter wanted to talk to him. And he came to Specter's office, and in Specter's office was a big poster, it was a phony, of Clinton with his arm around Arafat saying, Palestinian state. And he had bought that because he thought it was a very interesting poster when he was in the Mideast, did Specter. They had a very chilly beginning, the two of them. But then Arafat looks behind him and goes, you have the poster. That's one of my favorite posters. And Specter's, yeah, I really liked it. And they started talking about the poster. And in the picture in the Specter Center, you see Specter smiling with Arafat with his arm through his arm, like friends, with a big smile right in front of the poster. And because of that discussion that came from that, he agreed, Arafat, to hold off on his announcement if Specter would say on the Senate record that Arafat was being reasonable, which he did. So that picture is history. It isn't just two people posing. It perhaps is staving off a war or who knows what, because of the relationship between two men. And the final thing I'll say, which I love, is Clinton's impeachment papers are in the Specter Center, signed by every senator and the House managers. Specter voted against impeachment. He voted in favor of Clinton, which was, I think, the only Republican to do that. And on top of the impeachment papers is Bill Clinton's signature on his own impeachment papers. And he signed it because of, as a favor to Specter. So that's a really nice collectible, which when I retire, I will take, but I'll deny that and erase that from this because it's got some real value. And by the way, there's the pen that everyone signed with. It says untied states instead of United States. So I guess it was prolific in some way or whatever. So those pictures are really amazing. You know, when you go to Specter Center and see these things, they tell stories. They really do. So, John's back. Go ahead.
I have a very brief anecdote to follow on what you just said. Specter was proud of his contacts with world leaders. As I said earlier, whether they were dictator or Democrats, it didn't matter. At the entrance to his office on the 7th floor of the Senate office building, there was a picture on one side of Specter standing with Saddam Hussein, who was in his military outfit and with his sidearm on his set. And on the other side of the door was a picture of Specter and Mrs. Specter with Pope John Paul II. These were both life-size shots. And people noted it, particularly among the staff. And some said, this is an image problem here. we're blending the Pope with Saddam Hussein, but Specter didn't care. They were both world leaders and deserved to be recognized, particularly if they were standing with Arlen. And that sort of captures the dichotomy of the guy. But it also points to his willingness to deal with all sorts of world leaders, good and bad, in the interest of global peace. And I think it was one of his strongest suits. So anyway.
I agree, John. All right, folks. Thank you so much for hosting me. I really do appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
You.